So Google this week basically published some data on one of its artificial intelligence supercomputers. And they came out with a bit of a flash bomb saying it was more powerful and more efficient than competing NVIDIA systems. Okay, just pause there. NVIDIA, 90% of the market. NVIDIA, pretty much the uncontested hardware winner of the generative AI boom, at least declaratively at this state. And a company, by the way, that I was recommending on CNBC Squawk in the middle of July or August last year when it was literally down 70%. So I just want to be very upfront. I see the value. I believe in NVIDIA, but I am very interested in this kind of new architecture and posturing that's going on in the market. Because right now, you've got kind of a couple of things that are going on. You've got layers of abstraction, which is you've got hardware for AI and then you've got software for AI. And so nothing has been a more critical layer of abstraction for the mass adoption of powerful conversational generative AI than OpenAI and ChatGPT. This has brought it into the limelight. We're seeing it embedded into software like Bing. You've seen it push the speed of innovation from companies like not only Microsoft, but Google, Adobe, and others at a breakneck pace. Well, Pat, you and I love to say you can't run this shit on air. Oh no, I swear.
Now we're going to get the explicit. We're going to get the explicit now.
Yes, okay. I've always wanted one of those. Or Connor, we can post-prod beep that out. But you know what?
I don't know. I feel good about myself. I don't use F 5 times during an hour-long conversation. So
I'm passionate about this topic. So the bottom line here is what's going on now is you've got a war going on among megatech. You've got a war for who's leading what. Of course, we know none of this runs without hardware. NVIDIA is certainly a player, but companies like Google are developing hardware. Companies like AWS, which I recommended last week on TV, as a semiconductor company, are making hardware. And then, of course, you've got companies like Intel and AMD that are going to suddenly become very interesting because anytime a company has over 90% of a market, they become exposed. Pat, especially when they start competing with their biggest outlets, like, a cloud offering that's going to compete with AWS and what they're doing rather than working with. That's a really interesting thing you pointed out, and I thought was really interesting. We should talk more about that at some point. My overall take, Pat, this is remember with quantum supremacy and when Google and IBM and all them would kick back and forth? I feel like this is what we're at right now. I do not feel like this really is that important, except for the fact that all these companies want to let the world know and be very declarative that they're in the game. And after Google got end-arounded by Microsoft a few weeks ago with the OpenAI thing, it absolutely got put on its heels and had to come out with Bard prematurely, and that flopped. Google, I think, came back and said, no way, not again. We are not going to allow all the other companies to quietly be declared the winners of the AI race when there's probably no company with a better data training set of data than Google. And there's no company that's, I would argue there may not be a company that's spent more on real R&D around AI than Google. And this to me is sort of a shot across the bow to the whole industry that Google's here to play. I think this will impact their cloud business. I think this is going to impact their overall business. And I think this is why I call it fluid. Google does have a bigger role to play than they're being given credit for today.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And I think that Google's move to call out NVIDIA had two planes on it. First of all, there was an investor plane, which says, hey, Google, if everybody's using the same hardware as each other, how are you going to differentiate there? How are you going to lower costs? If you look at the entire generative AI revolution, it's expensive, right? I think we're looking at between 100 and 200 times the cost to do a search on GPT versus just standard index-based search. So there are cost elements to that. I think the other element, and I'm waiting for this shoe to drop here, is how that gets integrated into Google Cloud and the enterprise customers, right? And how does Google, differentiate, let's say, versus Trainium and Inferentia out there? It looks like Azure is pretty tied up, at least, today. and not going to do their own inference or training hardware. The one thing I wanted to point out, and it's in the Chiron right up here, is Qualcomm, right? There was an ML perf test that went out, and lo and behold, who shows up? Qualcomm. And what a great follow-up to our interview with Qualcomm CEO Cristiano Amon at Mobile World Congress, where we interviewed him, and he talked about all of the investments that they're making into edge AI. And sometimes we forget that there is this edge where you do inference. I mean, sure, you can do that inside of the data center. You can do this on the edge, but Qualcomm actually beat everybody in some power efficiency tests. So, for instance, the amount of images per watt, as an example. And if you think about it, and the pressure that boards of directors are getting for the environmental elements of the business, that has to count for something. And I'm convinced more than ever that we will see Qualcomm in the data center or the data center edge, and whether it's the A100, the A200, if it takes 10 years to get into this market, Qualcomm is going to make a move. And then when you connect that with what they're doing on the client PC, in the move they're making inside of Windows, I think this clearly puts NVIDIA on the map if there were any doubters that Qualcomm should be put in the mix of potential people who can benefit big time from this. I think everybody knows that when it comes to premium Android smartphones, Qualcomm was going to make a major play here. I mean, they have a very high degree of market share here. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon in the Android market. But when it comes to infrastructure AI, this was quite a move here. And first of all, I was glad that Reuters picked up on this. Stephen Ellis is a longtime reporter on chips. I've had some good relationships with him. So congrats on Qualcomm. And as we always say on this show, competition is good. Competition drives innovation. Competition keeps costs at a reasonable point.
Yeah, I think we hit that one. And good call on adding Qualcomm to the discussion. A company that I think will continue to surprise in the space. And we know the edge is growing and becoming more and more critical, and we're going to have to do more and more inference on the device. That's also going to be an interesting inflection for the PCs, Pat, in the near future.